The morning sky above Singapore shimmered in shades of soft orange and pale blue. The air was calm, the runway lights flickering like quiet guardians of the day's first flights. Inside Terminal 3, passengers moved in an easy rhythm, some with coffee cups in hand, others lost in the glow of phone screens. For Flight 709, a Boeing 787 bound for Sydney, everything appeared utterly normal. Captain Raymond Carter, a veteran pilot with over 20 years of experience, checked the final logs in the cockpit. His co-pilot, 27-year-old Daniel Hayes, reviewed the pre-flight checklist beside him. They'd done this hundreds of times, a synchronized routine, smooth and practiced. The crew prepared the cabin. The passengers settled in. Families returning home, business travelers, students heading abroad. 200 souls boarding a machine they trusted without question. At 8:12 a.m., the engines roared to life. The runway stretched out like a path to infinity. The plane lifted into the air, slicing through the mist with effortless grace. Within minutes, the city below turned into a mosaic of colors, and clouds swallowed the horizon. Everything felt peaceful, predictable, as if nothing could possibly go wrong. But 40 minutes into the flight, as they crossed the coast of Indonesia, a faint smell began to drift through the cabin. It was subtle at first, a whisper of something metallic, sharp, and unfamiliar. A few passengers wrinkled their noses, exchanging uncertain glances. One flight attendant, Maria, paused near the rear galley. She checked the ovens, the coffee makers, the cabin vents. Everything looked fine. She told herself it was nothing. In the cockpit, Daniel noticed a flicker on the engine temperature gauge. Just for a second, a small red blink, then it vanished. He noted it mentally and went back to adjusting altitude. The plane climbed higher into thinner air, smooth and steady. Then came the smell again, stronger now, acrid, burning. Maria's calm broke. She rushed to the interphone, her voice controlled but urgent. She reported the odor spreading near the left side of the aircraft. At that same moment, a faint haze began to rise near the rear ceiling lights, almost invisible against the cabin's dim glow. Within seconds, it thickened. In the cockpit, the first alarm sounded. Engine 2 temperature warning. Daniel's heart rate surged. He scanned the readings. One engine was overheating rapidly. Captain Raymond's hands moved with precision, switching to emergency protocols, reducing power, rerouting fuel flow. But the numbers climbed faster than the system could respond. Passengers started coughing as the smell filled the cabin. Some panicked, others prayed quietly. Flight attendants moved through the aisle with oxygen masks and forced smiles, but their trembling hands betrayed them. Raymond called for the nearest emergency airport, Denpasar. Bali. Air traffic control responded instantly, giving clearance for immediate descent. But they were high 36,000 feet, and the fire alarm was spreading. Faster than they could drop at 8:56 a.m., the left engine burst into flames. The passengers felt a violent jolt. The aircraft tilted slightly as the fire's heat distorted one wing's aerodynamics. Outside the windows, orange light flickered against the cloud cover. Unreal, almost cinematic. Inside, chaos began to ripple through the rows. Luggage fell, a baby screamed. The air masks dropped from the ceiling like lifelines. Raymond's voice over the PA was calm, almost impossibly so. He told everyone to stay seated, stay calm, put on their masks. But inside the cockpit, both men knew the truth. The fire wasn't contained. It was spreading into the wing structure. The aircraft shook again, a low, shuddering vibration that crawled up the fuselage. Systems started failing one by one. Cabin pressure alerts, hydraulic loss, electrical malfunctions. The radio crackled with static. The co-pilot's fingers moved across switches faster than thought, shutting off fuel to the burning engine, trying to isolate the fire. The plane's AI system activated automated suppression. Foam and halon sprayed through the ducts, but the temperature kept rising. Below them, the vast expanse of ocean shimmered in morning light. Nowhere to land, no runway in sight, just endless blue stretching into the horizon. Smoke began seeping into the cockpit. Raymond pulled down his oxygen mask, his voice rough as he declared a mayday. The distress signal went out to all nearby frequencies. Flight 709 declaring emergency. Left engine fire, losing control. Control towers from 3 countries began tracking them. Rescue units scrambled. Fighter jets were put on standby. But in that vast sky, they were utterly alone. In the cabin, passengers were sobbing quietly. Clutching hands, whispering prayers, the cabin crew tried to reassure them, but their faces told a different story. The rear section was now filled with thin gray smoke. The air reeked of burning plastic and jet fuel. The plane began descending, and fast but steady. Raymond knew the window was closing at 5 minutes, maybe less, before the fire consumed the left wing. He focused entirely on the controls. His voice clipped and calm as he issued commands to Daniel. Every movement was deliberate, switching off hydraulics, trimming the flaps, diverting electrical load. Daniel was shaking, sweat running down his temple despite the freezing air conditioning. He could see the flames reflected in the window beside him, glowing brighter against the white of the clouds. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he thought of his wife. He had promised her this flight would be an easy one, routine, just another line in the logbook. The aircraft broke through the clouds, revealing the ocean below. The surface was calm, glittering under the morning sun. Denpasar was still 200 kilometers away. They had to make it. For the passengers, time slowed. The seatbelt signs flickered. Oxygen masks swayed gently in the turbulence, and the smell of fire filled every breath. Yet somehow, amid all the fear, there was silence, a collective moment where everyone realized they were staring at death, and still moving forward. Raymond's mind raced. They needed altitude to glide, but too much, and the flames would spread faster. He'd been in storms, engine failures, even near collision, but never this. The fire had reached the fuel line. One wrong move, and the entire aircraft would ignite midair. He looked at his co-pilot, no words. Just a nod and unspoken understanding between men who knew what came next. 5 minutes. 200 lives. One burning aircraft. The clock had started. The first thing they lost was silence. The cockpit, once filled with steady hums and quiet beeps, now echoed with alarms and mechanical cries. Warnings flashed across every panel. Engine temperature critical. Hydraulic pressure low, fuel imbalance detected. It was chaos layered over control. The kind of storm only pilots could understand. The left engine blazed like a comet against the endless sky. The wing shimmered from the heat, the paint peeling under fire's hunger. Below, the ocean stretched like a mirror, calm, endless, indifferent. The horizon seemed so close, yet impossibly far. Captain Raymond Carter gripped the controls with one hand and monitored the instruments with the other. Every second mattered. The oxygen masks pressed tight against their faces, voices muffled by the rush of air. Both men could feel the trembling beneath their seats. Not turbulence, but the mechanical shudder of a dying engine. Inside the cabin, the world had changed completely. The smell of burning insulation mixed with the metallic scent of fear. Passengers clung to one another. A few whispered silent prayers. Others stared straight ahead, frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. The overhead lights flickered, casting ghostly flashes of white and yellow. The flight attendants moved quickly, handing out wet towels, closing vents, comforting whoever they could. Their training had taught them calmness, but nothing could prepare them for this. Raymond began the descent. The plane dropped from 36,000 feet to 20,000 in minutes, cutting through the clouds like a wounded bird. Each shift in altitude sent a deep vibration through the fuselage, rattling trays, cups, and hearts alike. At 25,000 feet, a violent shudder rocked the aircraft. The fire suppression system had finally failed. The flames spread beyond the nacelle, licking the underside of the left wing. Through the windows, passengers could see the glow, orange and relentless, reflected on the wing's metal surface. Someone screamed. Someone else fainted. The cabin crew shouted instructions no one could hear. In the cockpit, the co-pilot tried to restart emergency hydraulics. Without them, they would lose control of the ailerons, and the plane would spiral. The airspeed indicators wavered. Smoke crept through the vents. Their world was shrinking. Vision clouded, lungs tightening. Raymond made a choice, risky, desperate, but the only one left. He cut off the left engine completely. The plane jerked hard to one side, then steadied. Now it was flying on a single engine, a fragile balance between life and gravity. Outside, clouds split apart, revealing flashes of blue sea below. They were descending fast, too fast. But the captain's instinct guided every motion. each adjustment on the control yoke delicate yet decisive. The autopilot had failed, leaving human hands to fight against physics. The radio hissed. Faint voices came through. Control towers from Denpasar, Jakarta, Manila, everyone trying to reach them, but the signal was weak, distorted by static. For a few seconds, there was only the shriek of wind and the whine of metal under pressure. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere turned surreal. Oxygen masks swayed like pendulums. Overhead compartments had burst open. Belongings floated midair in brief moments of zero gravity as the plane jolted. A child's stuffed toy drifted across the aisle, landing near a woman clutching a rosary. The world inside the jet had become slow motion, the kind where time stretches between each heartbeat. Daniel fought the smoke filling his lungs. Every breath burned. His fingers shook as he reset the auxiliary. Power system, the only way to keep their navigation instruments alive. Sparks shot from a side panel. The lights dimmed again. For a moment, everything went dark. The cockpit plunged into partial silence, only the sound of the single engine droning in the background. Then, one by one, emergency lights flickered back on, painting both pilots' faces in shades of red and amber. Their eyes met briefly, no words, only shared resolve. Raymond forced the aircraft lower into thicker air. Altitude, 15,000 feet. Fuel remaining, dropping fast. Fire status, critical. Denpasar, still too far. He looked out the window. The left wing was now partially scorched, the outer flaps gone. The flames had begun to die down, not because they were extinguished, but because there was nothing left to burn. The metal had warped under the heat, twisting like melted foil. If the wing gave out, the plane would break apart mid-air. He couldn't let that happen. He redirected airflow toward the right side, easing pressure on the damaged structure. Every move was precision born of experience, every decision a gamble against time. Then came the wind shear. A sudden blast from the ocean currents hit them from below, throwing the plane upward like a toy. Passengers screamed as gravity inverted for a split second, then slammed them back into their seats. Coffee cups, phones, and papers scattered through the cabin. The aircraft dropped again violently. Oxygen masks swayed like ghosts in a storm. In the cockpit, warning lights went red again. The right engine was overcompensating, too much strain. Raymond throttled back, stabilizing power. The plane steadied, though still losing altitude. They were now at 10,000 feet, low enough to breathe without masks, but still surrounded by smoke. Below, a faint line of land appeared on the horizon. Bali. But it was still over 100 kilometers away, or a distance that could vanish or double in a single wrong move. The ocean beneath shimmered with sunlight. Raymond scanned the coastline, calculating. There was a chance, slim but real, to ditch in shallow waters, near the shore if the wing failed before they reached the runway. The intercom system crackled, but no one could hear him anymore. Power was fading. The cabin lights flickered weakly, then stabilized at half brightness. In the dim light, faces appeared pale, motionless, caught between hope and terror. The heat inside the cockpit had risen to unbearable levels. Smoke clung to the walls like fog. The air smelled of burnt wires and fear. Daniel coughed violently, wiping soot from his visor. His hands never left the controls. Every second stretched like eternity. For a moment, the world outside grew strangely quiet. No alarms, no shaking, just wind, clouds, and the distant shimmer of land. The fire had died down. The sky looked peaceful again, as if mocking what was happening inside. But Raymond knew better. The sensors were dead. The fire might still be burning inside the wing, invisible, eating through structure from within. He looked ahead o'er the runway lights of Denpasar, faintly blinking through haze. They were almost there, almost. But then, a new sound shattered the fragile calm. A deep metallic crack from the left wing. The fire was gone, but the damage was done. The outer wing structure was giving way. Raymond's heart pounded as he adjusted pitch and balance, trying to keep the aircraft steady. The horizon tilted, slightly then sharply. 200 lives hanging in balance. The sea below. The land ahead. And 5 minutes that could decide everything. The descent had only just begun. The sky was clear now, deceptively calm, as if nature itself had stepped back to watch. Below, the turquoise ocean stretched endlessly, and beyond it, a faint outline of Bali shimmered through the haze. To anyone watching from the ground, Flight 709 looked like a small silver bird limping across the sky, trailing smoke against the morning light. But inside, it was a world on the edge of collapse. The fire had eaten deep into the left wing structure. The metal, weakened and warped, groaned under the strain of flight. Tiny fragments of paint and aluminum peeled away, carried off by the high-speed winds. The smell of burnt fuel still hung in the air, mixing with the bitter scent of melting wires. Every vibration, every sound felt like a countdown. Captain Raymond's hands trembled slightly on the yoke, not from fear, but exhaustion. The oxygen mask pressed tightly against his face, leaving red marks on his skin. His uniform was drenched in sweat, despite the freezing air blowing. Through the cockpit vents, Daniel monitored the last working instruments. His fingers steady, but his breathing heavy. The systems were collapsing one by one, fuel balance lost, hydraulics almost gone, and the left flaps completely unresponsive. They were flying a dying aircraft. The cockpit lights flickered again. Smoke thickened behind the panels, crawling up like shadows. Outside, the sunlight turned harsh and blinding. Through the window, the damaged wing trembled under turbulence, its inner structure barely holding together. At 8,000 feet, the altimeter ticked down rapidly. The ocean's surface was close enough to see, white waves forming, lines like veins across blue water. The aircraft shook violently, not from turbulence but from internal imbalance. The left side dragged, pulling downward, forcing Raymond to apply constant pressure on the controls just to keep level. Inside the cabin, passengers gripped armrests, eyes locked on the windows. The smoke had lessened, but the tension was unbearable. Every second felt stretched like living inside a heartbeat that refused to end. A few people closed their eyes, whispering silent goodbyes. A mother clutched her child against her chest, shielding her eyes from the view outside. The cabin lights dimmed once more, faint orange glows flickering through the smoke. For a fleeting moment, the world seemed frozen in silence. Then, a metallic crack echoed through the aircraft, a sound that ripped through every layer of hope. The left wing began to bend. The structure had finally reached its limit. Through the cockpit window, Raymond saw the wing flex violently, flames erupting again near its base. Alarm screamed. The aircraft rolled sharply to the left, nose dropping, altitude plummeting. Passengers screamed. The plane tilted 20 degrees, then 40, and gravity shifted. Trays, bags, oxygen masks, everything flew sideways. A coffee cup hit the ceiling before shattering on the floor. People tumbled, clutching whatever they could. The world became a blur of motion, wind, and raw panic. Below, the ocean grew larger, shimmering, endless, waiting. The right engine strained to hold them up, roaring at full power. Its vibrations filled the cockpit like a heartbeat. Every instrument screamed warnings. Stall, pull up, hydraulic failure, structural damage. But Raymond tuned them out. His world had narrowed to instinct, focus, survival. Through the forward glass, the island was clearer now, and the long runway of Den Pacer glinting like a blade in the distance. It looked close enough to touch, yet unreachable. In the cockpit, Raymond forced the yoke forward and to the right, counteracting the roll. The controls were sluggish, the hydraulics nearly dead. The plane resisted like a wounded animal, each correction slower than the last. He could feel the airspeed bleeding away. Too slow, and they would stall. Too fast, and the wing would tear apart completely. Altitude, 6,000 feet. Distance, 70 kilometers. Time, less than 2 minutes before failure. The fire reignited under the left wing root, hidden but alive. The metal glowed faintly red. Inside the fuselage, a deep creak echoed, followed by a faint rippling sound, the kind that meant internal fractures. The aircraft trembled again. Daniel adjusted the throttle, keeping balance between thrust and drag. Every movement was deliberate, mathematical precision, mixed with human desperation. The ocean wind shifted suddenly, buffeting the plane sideways. The left wing dipped dangerously low. The altimeter spun faster. The crew knew what it meant, a partial stall. Raymond pulled up slightly, forcing the nose level. The aircraft shuddered violently but stabilized just above 5,000 feet. In the cabin, people clung together. No one screamed anymore. There was only silence, the kind that comes when humans accept the weight of fate. Someone reached across the aisle and held a stranger's hand. Two people prayed aloud, voices trembling but steady. The atmosphere was heavy, sacred, human. At 4,000 feet, land details became visible. Palm trees, rooftops, thin roads snaking through villages. The sea sparkled with reflected sunlight, almost mocking the chaos above it. Smoke trailed behind the aircraft like a scar across the morning sky. Raymond recalibrated again, flaps partially deployed, landing gear still retracted. If he extended them too early, the extra drag could snap the wing clean off. He waited, calculating the final descent angle. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the control panel. His pulse raced in sync with the aircraft's dying heartbeat. Altitude 3,000 feet, distance 30 kilometers. The radio crackled weakly. A faint voice from Denpasar Tower. Distorted but clear enough. Flight 709, runway ready. Emergency vehicles standing by. The message faded into static, but it was enough. Hope flickered again. The right engine screamed louder than ever, metal vibrating under the strain. Inside the cabin, the overhead panels began to shake loose. The fuselage moaned like something alive. Oxygen masks danced in the flickering light. The plane felt like it was unraveling mid-air. Raymond lowered the landing gear. Slowly, praying it would lock into place. The sound of gears grinding echoed through the body. For a brief second, it felt like the whole aircraft froze. Then, click, locked. Altitude, 2,000 feet. Distance, 10 kilometers. Runway visible. The city below shimmered under sunlight. Small buildings, green fields, and a thin stretch of asphalt leading straight into Hope. But Hope was fragile. The left wing sagged visibly, its inner structure nearly collapsing. The fuel pressure dropped. Warning lights flashed red across, the panel like a heartbeat racing. Toward its final beat, the plane's shadow appeared on the ocean below, dark and distorted. Every second mattered now. Raymond adjusted pitch, keeping descent steady. The co-pilot monitored speed, dangerously high for a damaged wing, but slowing meant losing lift. At 1,000 feet, the fire flared one last time, bursting through the outer shell of the wing in a storm of smoke and sparks. The passengers saw it, a flash of orange against blue sky, and braced themselves. The aircraft roared toward the shore. The ocean raced beneath. The runway loomed ahead. The end, or the miracle, was seconds away. The island grew larger with every passing second. The beaches, the green fields, the runway stretching across the coast like a lifeline drawn by fate itself. But the aircraft was falling faster than planned. The damaged left wing trembled violently, pieces of metal breaking off and spiraling into the ocean below. The engine screamed in protest as the right side fought to keep the plane balanced. The passengers felt the pressure shift, the drop, the tilt, the gravity pulling them forward. Some closed their eyes. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stared through the windows, watching the earth rise toward them. Inside the cockpit, Captain Raymond Carter's focus narrowed to a single point, the runway ahead. His hands were steady, every motion precise. There was no room for fear anymore. Altitude, 1,000 feet. Distance, 6 kilometers. The smoke inside the cockpit thickened, making visibility almost impossible. The oxygen masks were soaked with sweat. Daniel's hands trembled as he managed the throttle. One engine at maximum. One dead. The plane's nose oscillated slightly, up, then down, like a heartbeat fading but refusing to stop. The left wing groaned again, its inner flaps half melted and barely attached. Raymond began the final descent. Speed, 230 knots, too high. If he slowed too much, the aircraft would stall. If he kept it up, the landing gear could collapse on impact. He made the choice no pilot ever wants to make a controlled crash. The coastline rushed beneath them. White waves exploded against the rocks as the aircraft crossed the shore. Engines thundering, trailing fire and smoke. People on the beach looked up, frozen in disbelief, pointing toward the sky as a wounded giant roared overhead. Altitude 500 feet, distance 2 kilometers. The runway lights blinked through the haze like tiny stars guiding them home. Inside the cabin, time slowed. A mother held her child tight. A man pressed his forehead against the window, whispering to the sky. Two flight attendants gripped hands in the aisle, bracing themselves. The world had become a blur of light, smoke, and heartbeats. The impact came not as one violent crash, but as a series of brutal, controlled collisions. The plane hit the edge of the runway, hard. Sparks erupted beneath the landing gear. Tires exploded. Metal screeched against asphalt. The entire fuselage shuddered, bouncing once, twice, before grinding down with a deafening roar. The left wing tore apart, bursting into flames as debris scattered across the tarmac. The right engine screamed one last time before dying. The cockpit filled with smoke and heat. Raymond pulled every lever he could, cutting power, deploying reverse thrust manually. The world outside blurred. Runway, trees, flashing lights, chaos. Then of silence. The sound of metal scraping faded. The aircraft slid to a halt halfway down the runway, broken, smoldering but whole. For a few seconds, no one moved. The air was thick with smoke and disbelief. Then a single cry echoed through the cabin, followed by another. Soon the entire plane filled with the sound of sobs, gasps, and the trembling breath of the living. Emergency doors burst open. Slides deployed. Passengers poured out into the sunlight, coughing, weeping, holding each other. Fire trucks surrounded the wreck, spraying foam across the burning wing. The once proud jet now lay crippled, its skin scorched, but its heart still intact. In the cockpit, Raymond removed his oxygen mask slowly. His hands shook as he exhaled, eyes fixed on the runway ahead, that thin strip of earth that had carried 200 souls. Back from the edge of death, Daniel sat beside him, staring blankly into the smoke-filled air, his mind unable to process what they had just survived. Outside, rescue crews rushed to help. Medics pulled survivors to safety. Some passengers kissed the ground. Others simply looked up, at the same sky that had nearly become their grave. As the sun rose higher, its golden light washed over the wreckage, a reminder that even in destruction, there was grace. Reporters would later call it a miracle landing. Experts would say it was impossible. But for those who lived it, there were no words, only gratitude, tears, and silence. Raymond stood by the open hatch, watching the last passengers being evacuated. The smell of burnt metal lingered in the air. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot, but his eyes carried a calm only survivors know. 5 minutes. That's all it had taken. 5 minutes to turn life into chaos, and chaos back into life. And as fire crews doused the final flames, the wind carried away the last trail of smoke, leaving only the glimmer of sunlight reflecting on the broken wings of Flight 709, a machine that refused to die, a miracle written in fire and courage.